story, but it does do a really good job of, if you've got a couple of minutes and just want to see quickly where we've been able to reach and how we've been able to reach them, this is a good way to do that. So I think before we kind of get into the incentives as a whole, I think it's important to just make sure we understand the role that incentives play in our different programs. Incentives are one of many factors that companies assess when deciding, where to locate. So when you look at it, it's, quality of life, business environment, labor, talent, housing. Those are all factor into decisions that how it factors into what, whether a company makes their decision to move here or they move elsewhere. So, the thing that's important also to keep in mind is, our incentives compete with 49 other states' incentives. We're all kind of in that same boat. So, our reality is we have to be competitive. We have to have incentives that are tailored to meet the needs of our businesses. And without a competitive set of incentives, we just won't have a seat at the table. So all these factors do matter, but incentives do play a role as well. Just kind of something to keep in mind. So as we're looking through our, fact and how we're kind of setting ourselves up, I think it's important for us to look at who we're trying to aspire to try to compete with, at least immediately. So obviously we have economic aspirations, are regional, certainly with Missouri and Oklahoma. And then eventually the goal is to, continue to grow. And we'd love to be able to get to be where the likes of North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas are. Just some things to keep in mind really briefly, as far as where we would like to see our state headed and who we would like to be able to be in more competitive, just be in better competition with over time. So I think next we'll start getting into the programs. I'll try to highlight some high level stuff. I do know we do have kind of a time limit here, and there are a lot of programs and a lot of information to share. So if I do glance over something, but you have a question, please let me know. But I'll try to keep it as short and brief as I can. So I think the best program to start with is our PEAK program, Promoting Employment Across Kansas. This is a very popular program that we use. So it allows companies to withhold and retain up to 95% of the withholding tax generated by new employment. They do have to meet wage costs and job creation in order to be able to do that. So it's important to note that even though this is one of the main incentives that we offer, as of June 30th, 2018, we no longer can use PEAK to retain jobs in Kansas. So this is strictly a new jobs-based incentive. It is a very popular one. We do use it a lot, and it is at the discretion of the secretary. But we did want to make sure that, if you look at some previous agreements, you'll see we did used to use it for retained jobs. That's no longer the case. So a really quick summary of PEAK. So as you can see, about $1.7 billion in total payroll generated off the 72.9 million in Kansas individual income tax withholding. But I think it's important, we kind of delve a little bit into detail on this. So the 72.9 million that was created, only 49.2 million of that is based off of wages or jobs that were created and incented by PEAK. There were other jobs that those companies created that were not necessarily PEAK-based jobs, but that does matter, right? So they wouldn't have come here without the PEAK, but they still were able to add more jobs to the economy, even though they weren't necessarily incented for those specific jobs. So in total, I mean, that is a tremendous impact for our economy. If you use industry-specific multipliers, you'll have 14,500 indirect jobs when you think about construction and the like, and then there's over 713 million in indirect earnings that are estimated. So, and then on the flip side, I think it's also important to note that I know Secretary Tolan has mentioned this in the past. We have to make sure we abide by agreements, and if companies are not abiding by agreements, we need to make sure they know we're keeping track of it, but also making sure that if needed, we terminate those agreements and claw back any dollars for any misuse of, taxpayer dollars based off not following agreements. So as you'll see on the list of PEAK agreements, there were 4 that were terminated this past fiscal year. 2 of them no money had exchanged hands. So as a result, they did not receive an incentive. So those were easily terminated. The other two we did claw back, and those totaled over $1.2 million. So on the bottom, you'll see a really good sub. So 62 companies signed new agreements. I believe that's up from 27 last year. We have 230 active agreements. And then LPA did a study in 2014 that estimated $57 ROI for every $1 spent in peak. So if you use that math, it's over $2.8 billion ROI on that. If you go kind of through the next slides, you'll see, I won't go through them, but we've got 9 slides of who received, where they're located county-wise, their NAICS industry, and then you'll see agreement status, whether it's completed. Completed means they've met the full year, they've met their agreement, and they're no longer receiving the incentive. Active means it's inactive, and then terminated means it's no longer in place, and we are no longer providing them any incentive. So if you go to the next program, this is probably our second biggest program, the High Performance Incentive Program. So it provides an income tax credit 10% for eligible capital investments that exceed $50,000 or $1 million specifically in 5 counties, so Shawnee, Douglas, Johnson, Wyandotte, and Sedgwick. It also provides a sales tax exemption, a training tax credit up to 50%, and then priority consideration for access to other programs. Some of the eligibility requirements are be a for-profit company, pay above average wages compared to the same geographical area, make a significant investment in your employment training, and the like. There are a couple things I want to note on this specific incentive. So because it's mostly the tax credit portion, there's nothing that we don't necessarily have the data in-house for who has claimed HPIP. We only certify the companies. That specific data rests with the Department of Revenue. So if you have specific questions on the number of tax credits, we certainly would invite you to talk with the Department of Revenue on that. We can simply give you the companies that are certified. But it's also important to note there are 2 things with this program that we would like to at some point see changed. One was a bill last year that actually passed 125-0 on the House, 39-0 in the Senate. But unfortunately, we just ran out of time. There was a slight difference in the bill between House and Senate, and it ended up not going through. But the bill would eliminate, so as I mentioned, there's a training requirement for HPIP, 2% of your state payroll. What that ends up being really costly for quite a few companies. Most companies train their employees as needed because they're paying them very high wage salaries and making major capital investments, so they don't necessarily have the need to do the 2% training every single year. So quite a few years back, the state legislature changed the law to be able to allow them to tap into ks.gov, and that's a training program we'll talk about in a little bit. But in order to qualify for HPIP, they could participate in ks.gov, get a reimbursement on their training, part of their training, and then because they qualified for ks.gov, they would qualify for HPIP. I think if you're sounding confused or this doesn't make any sense, the reality is it doesn't. We're forcing companies to tap into one incentive to qualify for another, when in reality, it's not an efficient way of use of taxpayer dollars. And also, this really isn't a beneficial system for the company, for the state, or for the taxpayer. So we really like to keep those 2 programs separate. We want to be able to eliminate the 2% tax credit, 2% training requirement for companies. That was an issue for them, which created this whole mess to begin with. The reality is, if you're paying tremendous wages, you're making a major capital investment, you're going to keep your employees up to date on their training and what they need, because you're paying them quite a bit. So we want to be able to make it, again, just a more competitive program and make taxpayer dollars at least go a longer way and be able to really have a full training program for ks.gov, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The second part of this is that on HPIP tax credits, one of the things we know from revenue, and I know they have testified to our commerce committees on multiple occasions, those tax credits do not end up getting used. Many companies are frustrated because, I guess, for whatever way they structure their tax, their company tax, they don't end up being able to have enough liability to use those credits. So we want to be able to make those tax credits transferable. That would put us in line with many other states. It would keep our program competitive, and it would really meet the needs of our businesses. Those are things we really look forward to talking with you in more detail, especially those of you that sit on commerce, but definitely in the legislature as a whole. We want to be able to talk to you about this issue and the importance. And I know for many of the companies in your district that do participate in HPIP, this is a very big deal. So really quick summary of HPIP. So we received 35 applications this year. It was a little bit down. The estimation is that was a impact as a result of COVID. Just so you know, the reason the HPIP certifications issued, the number is the same, and it's always higher than the applications received because the tax credit is good for 16 years, but you have to get recertified each and every year. So that number is always going to be higher than the applications we received. And then again, most of the summary I've provided here, I've already talked about. And this is I do apologize. So when we integrated the list for HPIP companies, it did not integrate cleanly. I did send Justin a PDF, so hopefully you all have received it. That is the full list of the HPIP companies we certified for that year. So next, I'll move to the rural opportunity zones. These were established in 2012. Now it includes 77 counties, up from the original 50. Originally, it was based off of a 10% population loss. That kind of has changed over time. There's two parts to the program: the tax waiver and the student loan repayment. So for the income tax waiver, you have to establish your domicile after the date the county took part in the program. And then student loan, you just have to be able to reestablish a domicile after the county has opted in. There's a little bit of differences between the program, but for the most part, if you move back to the county that is eligible, you're able to receive that incentive. You do need a county, for the student loan portion, you do need a county sponsor or an employer sponsor, depending on the county. So that does impact the amount of people that participate in the program. This is a really quick summary. Excuse me. But really quickly, again, the numbers have gone down a little bit year over year, and I am waiting. So the tax credit, I am waiting from revenue for 2019. I should have that shortly and be able to give that to you all. But there was a little bit of an impact from our report last year. The report showed that individuals are not necessarily moving as a result of RAS, and they may have moved there regardless. So if you look at the map, you can see that, you know, a couple of counties on the border of Nebraska, Colorado, and Oklahoma are taking part. But really, the middle part of the state is not seeing a tremendous impact from the program, at least the student loan side. And so if you look at some of the survey results, again, you'll see that most people are moving regardless. It's not necessarily impacting their decision. So I think what we looked at doing over the break was trying to figure out a way to make this program more efficient and effective. We're working on a bill to do that. We will have it introduced here in the next couple of weeks, but this is kind of just a quick glance at what we're seeing and what we're trying to address. I should stop. Are there any questions in the meantime while I kind of catch my breath here? Okay. Well, then I will keep going.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question. In the beginning of the slides, they listed jobs that were created. I'd like if he could send us, the committee, or off, however, describe how those jobs are counted. I know under these circumstances, most people were losing their jobs, not creating jobs. And so I'm wondering how that number was derived at. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator, are you talking about the initial, like, first slide where we talked about the 9,000 created and 4,000 retained?
Yes, thanks, David.
Sure. I'll get you a breakdown of each project and the amount of jobs that was created for each one.
And if you would send that to Justin, and then Justin could send that on to the committee, then there wouldn't be any via open, meetings violations that way. Sure thing. All right. Thank you for letting me catch my breath. If there are no other questions, I'll keep going here. So the next
The next incentive that we have is the Job Creation Fund. So this is designed to provide the state of Kansas with a deal closing fund. So it is meant to be flexible and adaptable to the ever-changing needs that the state and businesses have. It's important to note that only about 2 to 4% of projects each and every year receive JCF funds. This is not a common incentive that we use. It is a rarity. This is actually the creation about, I think it's about 10 years ago. They combined Impact and PIOF, two different funds, to be able to create this one deal closing fund. Each and every year we get about as of right now, it's about a little over $3 million allocation. There has been money that has been reappropriated each and every year, which is why we're able to go over that number a little bit. And the legislature was kind enough to be able to help us out a little bit this year with being able to provide some additional money. Some of that was a result of using JCF dollars to create the Hire Fund, which was a loan program for small businesses and hospitality. And then there were some other bigger projects to be able to help get those here to Kansas. So if you look at a summary, this is of FY20. We did 12 projects, a little over $8 million. And these are the specific job numbers for those projects, as just kind of a quick summary on that. And based on a previous LPA study, there is $39.60 in business investment per $1 invested in the state on the JCF related program. So the next incentive to be able to cover is, as I mentioned, KIT-KER. So KIT and KER, Kansas Industrial Training and Kansas Industrial Retraining. It's designed to assist companies who are creating new jobs by offsetting some of their training costs. This is really the only training incentive we have. It's a reimbursement. So what they do is they have their training costs. We offer to cover X percent, whatever percent it is of those training costs. And there is a max on that, which we'll cover here on the next slide. But for the most part, and then they kind of send us their bills, and then we confirm that is indeed what they spent, and then they receive a reimbursement on that. So if you look at comparative year over year, and this is the thing I want to be able to highlight, is if you look at 2010 versus 2020, not only was there additional funds available for training and retraining, but if you look at the average award amount, it's substantially different. And the reason being is that we do end up taking a big chunk of KIT-KER to be able to just qualify companies for HBIP, as opposed to using it for substantial training and retraining. And so it's very important to be able to have a functional training and retraining program, or should say fully functional, and being able to use that 1.6 million annually in a far more efficient manner. So when that bill was introduced yesterday in House Commerce, it'll be introduced on the Senate side here shortly. We do encourage you to support it. It would just create a more efficient program and efficient use of taxpayer dollars. So we did highlight here how many trainees each company had, the actual amount per trainee, and then so the total award itself. Next, we have community development block grants. So this is federal funds that we have, and their community development block grants are kind of split into two: entitlement, non-entitlement. All that means is basically it's based off of population. So any city that's 50 or county 50,000 or under, any city 50,000 or under, we cover. Otherwise, if you're thinking about, let's say, Overland Park, Wichita, Manhattan, Topeka, they receive their own funding straight from the federal government. So that's why they will not be in any of the awards we list. But this incentive is really established to just help communities enhance, their local community by providing financial, technical, business assistance, so whether it be water or sewer grants, community facilities, housing grants, urgent need grants, or commercial rehabilitation. That's really these types of projects that are covered. It is a competitive grant, so they do apply to the department, which grades out the awards. So if you look at FY 2020, 44 awards were made, totaling $18.5 million. We do realize, unfortunately, there was not a lot of applications out on the southwest side of the state. So one of the things we've instructed our business and development team, the in-state business development team, especially our team member out west, Jonathan Clayton, is to work with our folks to figure out, what potential opportunities there are that communities are not taking advantage of. So this could be a bit more reflective of the entire state. And this is a summary of kind of who the grantee was, what grant type, project, a little bit, just really quickly, a project description, and then the amount they received. And then on the bottom, we've got the average award amount for each project. Next, we have the Community Service Tax Credit Program. So this improves, the ability of some of our communities, again, to be able to undertake major capital, be able to help our communities with various, whether it be healthcare, youth, apprenticeship, youth job creation. It's a good tax credit program that has given not-for-profit organizations the ability to compete and create major differences in our communities. So tax credits are allocated each year and awarded on a competitive application basis. They can only go to not-for-profit organizations. Those not-for-profit organizations then offer the Kansas income tax credit to donors for approved projects. So what we did is we listed really quickly the types of projects. So this covers, again, community service, crime prevention, healthcare, youth apprenticeship, technical training. So they may request up to $250,000 in credits. Applications in rural areas, so that's 15,000 or less based on statute, are eligible for a 70% credit. Non-rural areas are 50%. So you'll see the numbers differ based on depending where the entity is, and rural areas do have an advantage in this program, and to be frank, rightfully so. It does help out a lot of our rural communities. It does make a major impact. Next, the next program we have is private activity bonds. This is a smaller incentive program. It's federally tax exempt bonds. So the federal government will provide us a volume cap that we can use. For last year, it was a little over 321 million. So in Kansas, the primary demand for this is mostly to rehabilitate residential rental projects. Every now and then we'll have a sewer project or the like, but for the most part, this does help rehabilitate some housing projects in our cities across the state. We don't get that many applications each and every year. It's usually about 10. And then by statute, we have to provide any volume that's not used as mortgage revenue bonds. But if you remember the audit from last year, there are some big complications that have been in place for why those mortgage revenue bonds don't get used by the two counties who run that program. So if you'll look, last year, I think we allocated about a little over 136 million to both counties who operate the mortgage revenue bond program for the state. And this for the last, I think, eight, nine years or so, it's gone unused. I'd refer to the audit for reasons why that was. It's a little bit complicated to explain, and I know we're running short on time, but yeah, for the most part, again, this is just a program provided to us by the feds to be able to, and we use it for the most part for affordable housing units and rehabilitation and acquisition of those units. And then I should also mention there is a program run by the Finance Authority to assist farmers who have not had substantial ownership in farmland or financing their agricultural business. So money is used for them to help start up their business on that end as well. Next one is Star Bonds. Again, I'll be able to run really kind of a brief overview of what the program is, but I'm going to need additional time to get you specific data on each project. We're hoping to have that. We owe a report to the legislature by the end of the month, so you indeed will have it. Our team is working on some of those finance details. But again, the goal of this program is to provide municipalities the opportunity to issue bonds to finance the development of major commercial, entertainment, and tourism areas. So there has to be a specific attraction involved in order to be able to have a Star Bonds district. And then I've walked you kind of really quickly through the process below, but basically, developers got an idea, they go to the city designs a plan, submits it to again, the local government, entity approves it, Commerce looks over it, makes sure it's okay, and then we kind of work with the city and, throughout, and then the city ultimately has to give final authority before it's sent over to the secretary, who gives the final authority on the state, and then, we start working on bond terms. And then here's a list of all the projects that currently are, that were approved. As you could see, there's some that are inactive. There's some that are still very much in the process. So I'm hopeful I should be able to update on each one of these again at the end of next week. And certainly if there's more information that's needed, I'd be happy to come back and testify, or hopefully the report itself. There's two reports. There's usually a summary report, and then there's a very thick financial report that will tell you all the financial details on each and every project. It's usually a couple hundred pages long. So you'll receive both of those, and you'll be able to look through it. And again, we'll be available for any questions on that. And then the last program I'm going to cover today is the Angel Investor Tax Credit. This is another one that expires this year. We're hoping to be able to renew. So we've got three programs: Star Bonds, Angels, and RAS, that we're seeking to renew this year. This is a really important program because it focuses on entrepreneurship and innovative entrepreneurs, and more specifically, and it provides, this is a tax credit that really helps companies that are seeking seed capital, so that initial round of capital in order to be able to push their business to compete with others. This is a program that's really built around helping small businesses that may not have the access or network to be able to compete with other businesses that do. Their ideas might very well be as innovative or as potentially successful as others. They just need some assistance being able to get their concept to the market, and that's where the state is able to help out by providing tax credits that they can exchange with investors for investment. Currently, by statute, they have to provide 50%. So if an investor comes in with a $100,000 investment, they have to give them a $50,000 tax credit. An investor cannot receive more than $50,000 each and every year from a company, and then $250,000 in total for that given year in tax credits. Currently, the Department of Commerce has $6 million in total in tax credits for a given year in Angels. A few years back, the program was not heavily used, or wasn't used as it should be. So there were years we were able to reappropriate. There was a little bit of a down, just a little bit less usage for our tax credits this year, and part of that is a result of COVID-19. But if you look at the two previous years, it was well over $6 million. So we're expecting that uptick to come back in 2021. So it is important that not only we renew the program, but we do consider adding some additional dollars into the program itself. So here is a list of the companies and the tax credits that were issued. Now, it's important for me, you'll see some $0 here. Just because we issued tax credits to a company that they can disperse to investors doesn't mean they were successful in being able to do so. So normally they have a timetable where if they were not able to do so by November and they do not feel they will meet it, they come back to us, give us the tax credit back, and then we will redistribute it to companies that do indeed have additional potential investors lined up. But nonetheless, they were approved. They are listed on our approved list of companies for angel investor tax credits. So we did want to include them in the report, but this is kind of a quick synopsis of the companies that received angel investor tax credit. So with that, again, the goal here was to just kind of give you a quick summary. There's far more details in the slides than I necessarily covered, but did want to give you just a quick overview, and then I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right. Hey, thank you, David, for a very thorough and organized presentation, as always. And for committee, for your questions, if you have a broad, overarching question, I'll take that now for that may be directed to David. If it's a specific question about a particular program, amount, location, then I would ask for you to email either David or Justin and take some time out to meet with David personally. He's very willing to meet with any of us and talk about these issues. So with that, are there any broad questions from committee members?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Jim.
Representative Gartner, I think this is an over or a broad question, but David, thanks for the presentation. Just on the CDBG, and you were showing, I think, over $18 million approved or allocated to that program. That's federal money, as you pointed out, but does that money fluctuate every year? Has it been traditionally about the same? And if you don't use all that money, can you reappropriate it?
I will get back to the committee on the reappropriation. For the most part, the numbers have been generally somewhat pretty consistent year over year. I think there were a couple of years with a little bit of a drop off. I do think there is a reappropriation because if I remember correctly, last year we were able to go over a little bit and have a special funding round, but let me double check to be 100% sure on that.
Yep, thank you.
Sure thing.
Other questions from committee members? All right, if you do have questions as you look through this document, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to David personally via email or phone. If you do not have those contacts, then of course you may just reach out to myself or to Justin and we'll put you in touch. David, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
No problem, my pleasure. Thank you all for your time.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm going to recognize Chris. We have consent calendar items. Just to let you know, on these consent calendar items, we don't have to take a formal vote to pass them, if I recall. But if there is somebody that wants to abstain or pull something out, then we can do so. So, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, you're correct. These don't need to be a motion and a vote. How it works is unless there's objection from a committee member, the following items will be considered approved. The only item today on the consent calendar is the approving the minutes from the December 16th meeting. So unless someone objects or specifically wishes to not be on the consent calendar approval, they are considered approved.
Any objections? It looks good. Looks like everybody's comfortable with that.
That's it, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I do want Justin to just take a moment here before we adjourn for the day to wrap up any items that we may have missed and also to kind of give us a highlight overview schedule of what you all will expect this year for meeting time. So Justin, if you will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, so fortunately we were able to clear a lot of our audit reports through the committee in November and December. So we've kind of cleared the slate here. I'll probably be working with Chairwoman Williams here coming up to schedule 2 meetings, probably one around early March and then probably one sometime in April. At the March meeting, you can anticipate our report on the Department of Labor unemployment system, specifically as it pertains to the fraud concerns, so that we have an objective that was added by this committee a while back to look at what fraud schemes the Department of Labor is aware of related to the unemployment assistance that has come from the federal government and what they're doing to address those fraud schemes. So we have a report that will be available sometime in March. In March, we will also give you an update on the results of our data mining function. We have a kind of a quiet function over here, just as some of our more quantitatively gifted folks who look through the state's credit card transactions, looking for anything that we think is suspicious or unusual. Just kind of an added service as your legislative auditors. We're always keeping eyes on the state's credit cards. We think there's some risks there. So we'll kind of update you on some of the things we've been doing. And then in April, we have a number of audits that will be coming to the committee. So one of those is the county procurement audit. This was requested by Representative Topliker. So this is about the controls that counties may or may not have in place when it comes to conflicts of interest when they're going out to make procurement decisions, contractual award decisions. We will also be presenting, hopefully in April, our audit on the hospital provider tax. So this is the issue that Senator Denning brought to the committee at the very end of last year. Senator Denning had some concerns about the proportions of that hospital provider tax that was going to hospital versus non-hospital providers. So we've got a question there. Also had some concerns maybe about the transparency of how that tax is being reported by the Department of Health and Environment. So we'll have our report on that. David today mentioned the Star Bonds program. We will be having our evaluation on the Star Bonds program. So this is our second. We've already released our first report on the Angel Investors Tax Credit Program. We will have it sometime in April an update on the Star Bonds. We've got a sample of projects that we've evaluated to try to give you a sense of its economic and fiscal impact. And so that'll be coming to the committee in April. And then finally, should mention, April is also classically the time that we come to you and ask for you to approve audit proposals for the coming year. So that's where you will get all the audit requests from legislators. Chris Clark will be leading you through that. So it kind of takes, sometimes we get between anywhere between 15 to 30 to 40. This year may be a little slower due to COVID and some of the exacerbating factors. So we will bring you what we have, and then we will ask you all to approve the audits that you are most interested in at that time. So I'm sure that's kind of just 2 meetings probably, with just a single audit in March and an update, and then several more and audit proposals in April. And again, I'll work with you as the chair to set those meeting dates, and we'll notify the committee as soon as we have them set.
Okay, thank you. And just so everybody is clear, we usually have these meetings over the lunch hour. We usually provide a lunch. For this year, likely it'll be a box lunch that you can eat in your own office. And so hopefully that will take place. Are there any questions from the committee about schedule? If you don't have questions, then of course we're available to you as we move forward. No questions? All right, Justin, anything else?
I just got a text from my deputy correcting me that it looks like our county procurement audit will actually be done in March and not April. So that may be done a little bit sooner. So
okay, that's great.
That is it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, if there are no questions, thank you everyone for meeting today, and hope to be in person in our next meeting. Reach out if you have any questions, and with that, we are adjourned.